been doing security for many years and I work around police officers in Tower City, I know a little bit about law enforcement. So I'm going to be talking about that as well. But having said all of that, I want to talk just a little bit here about how I became a conservative politically, because as you look into my description, you'll see in my description, if you got a chance to read it, that I am a conservative and a black conservative, as you can see, in particular. That can pose a lot of problems for a lot of people that are black, particularly. Black people feel like, I've been called all kinds of names on Facebook. It's crazy. I've been called all kinds of names on Facebook and you name it. Coons, bootlickers, Uncle Toms, what the F's wrong with you? You sound like you effing crazy. All kinds of crazy nonsense and names that I've been called as a black conservative. I've had more persecution, verbal persecution from black people who tended to be Democrats or liberals than I have from white. I've never had any problems from white people since I've been a conservative. But I'm going to talk about that just a little bit here. I want to speak a little bit about how I became a conservative politically. In my early 20s, when I became conscious politically, from a friend of mine, my best friend actually, was also happened to be my pastor. And he had spoke to me about getting a little bit more involved in politics in my 20s, and he had told me about how I should vote and so forth. And what he would imply, but not come right out and say that I can remember, he would imply that the Democratic Party was the party to vote for. As a black man, you need to vote for it. Now, I didn't verbally say it, but he said it in so many ways. The implication was I got from him was that the Democratic Party or the Democratic politicians should be the ones you vote for because they're for the poor people, they're for black people, they've always helped people, yada, 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 yada. I found out that that's not true when I studied history, but that's another story, and I'll talk about that a little later. If it's not in this video, it'll be in my next video. So he told me, well, the Democratic Party is the party to be, it's a party to vote for, yada, 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 this, that, and the other, woo, woo, woo. So I said, okay, so I started voting for the Democratic Party when I did vote. I didn't read about it. I never asked any more questions about it. I didn't say, well, you know what, I need to know a little bit more about this. All I was told, or at least from either indirectly or directly, from my best friend at the time, and from family members and other African Americans, that the Democratic Party was a party to vote for when I was in my 20s. I never read up on it. I never said, you know what, let me see what this is all about. Because most of them would say that the Republican Party was a party, that protected white, rich people, and you shouldn't bother with them, yada, yada, yada. So I didn't really bother at the time to do any research, to do any studying, to any reading. I was a very absent-minded person back then. I wasn't slow or dumb. I was just absent-minded. I was not a very focused person like I am now, to God be the glory, but I was not a very focused person. So whatever you said when I was in my teens and 20s, I mean, man, I didn't look at it. I just believed it. If it sounded convincing, I rolled with it. So as the years went by, year after year after year, from the 20s, 30s, 40s, right around the time that Donald Trump began to campaign in 2016 for president, at the time, I was working at a downtown Cleveland Lions block by block, which some of you may or may not have heard of, but it's like it's like a business that basically what they do is they clean up all the garbage in your cities. They provide security. They clean up all the garbage. They're called ambassadors. The employees are called ambassadors. And essentially what they do is they represent your city at the best of their ability. Well, anyway, I was working for this particular company, this particular corporation or business. And I remember I was on patrol. And as I was walking down the street on Euclid, on 4th Street, they had these big cameras. These big big TVs that was inside this bar that didn't have any walls. It was all the walls were like opened up, opened up. All you had was all these chairs and seats and bar stools and so forth. So people could sit outside and eat and sit outside and drink and probably just have a good time. And they had all these TVs, and up on all these TVs was Donald Trump campaigning. And I remember walking down the street, doing my patrol, doing my regular, and I remember hearing him talking, and I thought it was so interesting. I was like, man, this is pretty interesting here. And I was feeling this sense of energy coming from him from the screen. I'm like, man, this is interesting, you know. So I sit and I stood and I began to listen to him, and I remember him. I distinctly remember him saying, "Black people, what do you have to lose?" He didn't say what he was going to necessarily do for black people, whatever. He just simply said, "Black people, what do you have to lose? You don't have any job, you don't have this and the other. What do you have to lose if you vote for me?" Basically, what he was saying, and he made a valid point, but I didn't really let it sink in deep. I just heard what he said, and I said, "Okay." Went about my business. I never took to heart what he said. But it was a seed dropped in my heart, a seed dropped in my mind, if you will. So I went on by my business. And as time went by, as time went on, I began to start hearing a lot of different things on YouTube. I would go to YouTube and then I would go to certain channels like ABL, Anthony Brown Logan, Jericho Green, Brandon T. Tatum, and I would listen to these guys, black guys, all African American guys, articulate, knowledgeable, and they would talk about how the Democratic Party was the original party of slavery. That the most of the people that held slaves back during the slavery days, most if not all of them were Democrats. And that it was the Republican Party that was a party that was raised up basically to push back on the Democratic Party, to basically help set the black people free. And that was like a revelation to me because for years I've been taught the other way. And this was a shock to my system, but I've always been an open-minded person. And I would say in my 40s, and I know this is interesting, but I've always been a reader. Let me go back a little bit. In my 20s, in my teens and 20s, I was always a reader. I didn't read as much as I read now, but I was always a reader. I used to read a lot of Stephen King novels and stuff like that. And I didn't read nonfiction books. I mostly read fiction books, but I was a reader. The mentality of reading was already in me. And it wasn't until I reached my 40s that I started to, early to mid 40s, I started really digging into reading a lot of books that were nonfiction books, motivational books, religious books, motivational books, and so, you know, self-help books and so forth, to try to become a better person. And when I heard these young men, African American men, YouTubers, talking about the Democratic Party and their origin, and the Republican Party and their origin, it just opened my mind to a whole gamut of like, man, what's going on? It was like I was in it was like a whole new world. And as I said earlier, because I was always a reader, I always kept an open mind on things that may be new that I never heard of. I never automatically shut something off that's new to me. A lot of people shut stuff off that's new to them, or that it's new, I don't want to hear about it. But what if what is new is something that can help you? Don't shut your mind off from something that is new. See what it might be about. Research and dig a little bit deeper because it might be something that might help you. Well, anyway, I heard about it. I said, man, okay. So I started buying a book. And one of the books that I bought was a book written by it was, I think it was an Indian man, Dinesh D'Souza, I believe is his name. Some of you might have heard of him. And the name of the book, hold on one second. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go get that book right now. One second here. One second here. One second. One second. And here we go. This is the book. It's called Death of a Nation. Needless to say, as you can see, it's kind of messed up here. But that shows you that I've been reading it a lot. So that's a good thing, right? I purchased this book back in maybe 2016, about 2020. No, I'm sorry, my apologies. 2018. I literally purchased this book in 2017 or 2018 because it was actually released in 2018. So it had to be in 2018. What am I talking about? Purchased this book in 2018 and it just blew me away. Blew me away. The name of the book is Death of a Nation, and that's the title of the book. And at the bottom it has Plantation Politics and the Making of the Democratic Party. This man really laid it out online, but at the time I was still psychologically a Democrat. I had not transferred over into being a conservative. because I didn't know that much. I mean, I was this was still new to me. I was like, man, what's going on? I mean, So I bought this book. It blew my mind. And I was like, okay. So then, as time went on, I began to transition a little bit more and more into the conservative side. And as I watched more videos from people like Anthony, as I mentioned earlier, from Anthony Brown Logan, Random T. Tatum, Jericho Green, Larry Elder. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are familiar with them. Those on the conservative side are more or less familiar with these individuals. Great men, great men. Also, Patricia Dixon. I subscribe to her. Great woman. Prior military, very knowledgeable, loves her country, and she's a conservative. And I started listening to these guys. And from that point on, I was thoroughly convinced, man, all this time, I had been told that the Democrats were the ones that were supposed to be helping black people and helping the poor people. No, I was wrong. And so, because of that, I began to slowly transfer over into the conservative side. So I would say officially I've been a conservative for maybe 6 years, 2016, even though from 2016 to now, even though in 2016 I still had there was still some struggling going on psychologically. It's not hard to get me to convince me of something that's factual. Once I read it and I see the documentation and I see the evidence of it, I'm like, okay, not that it's crazy and retarded, but if I see documentation and evidence of it that's really strong, it's really strong, and and I know in my heart that this is correct, and the Spirit of God is showing me, man, there's something right about this. This is the right thing to do. Then I go with it. So I've been a conservative for about 6 years now. It's important that I believe that as African Americans, it's important that we understand the origin of politics, the origin of the Democratic Party, and the origin of the Republican Party. Now, the Republican Party is not a perfect party, and all Democrats. Let me say this real quick because I don't want nobody to get the wrong idea, because there may be someone who may be a Democrat that's watching this and listening to this, or you may be independent. You may be neutral. You may not be either. All Democratic politicians are not bad people. So I'm not against all Democratic politicians. There was one particular African American Democratic politician about I think a couple of years ago. I think his name is Vernon. I can't remember his name, but some of you may know him. And he left the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party party line, because he felt that they would turn their back on him. He was in support of Donald Trump's policies. May not have been so much of support of Donald Trump as in terms of his personality, but the policies is what he was in support of. And when he began to support Donald Trump's policies, many of the Democratic politicians turned against him. So that became a major issue. So he was a Democrat, but he ended up saying he was a good guy. Just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean that you evil or bad or satanic. Just because you're a Republican don't mean you love the Lord and you say sanctified and filled with the Holy Ghost and you want to do good with everybody. It don't always work that way. It's really an individual thing. What's in your heart? What's really in your heart? You can be a born again believer and be a Democrat, because a Democratic politician, or vote for Democrats but I'm going to talk about that a little bit though, as a Christian, because your salvation is not based on your political party. It's based on your faith in Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ was to come back right now, you go with him if you was a Democrat. Doesn't matter whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican. Your political affiliation has nothing to do with your salvation. However, I must say this. This is what I believe. Now, I'm giving you my personal view on this. As a born-again Christian, I personally do not vote for Democratic politicians because they support things that I personally believe are not biblically supported. For example, I believe that abortion is a sin. And why do I believe that abortion is a sin? It's because I believe it's murder. Regardless, I don't care what the scientists say. I don't care what these activists say. Well, it's just a fetus inside this. Come on, man. If I don't care about all of that. If it's just a fetus inside the stomach or whatever, what if your mother, if those that listen to me right now or may be supportive of it, or those who support abortion, what if your mother or what if your parents decided to abort you? And maybe you a doctor or you a lawyer, you somebody that got a advanced degree or something. What if they had aborted you? You would never have gotten to where you are now. A lot of people that have done great things in this world and have brought great blessings and benefits to our world. Thank God that that their mother didn't abort them. But that's another story, and I digress. Point is that as a Christian, I personally don't believe that it's proper, in my personal view, for another Christian, black, white, Hispanic, whatever the case may be, to vote for politicians that support and push for legislation and policies that I personally believe are anti-biblical. I don't believe God is sitting in heaven and saying, well, you know, the baby isn't born yet, so it's no big deal. Really, do you really honestly believe God is sitting in heaven? It's like, oh, abortion is no big deal. That's no big deal. Since 1973, when abortion was legalized in America, it is said that some sources say that over 60 to 65 million babies have been aborted. And in the and among black people, but get this statistical finding, this is what I found out too, is that black people, African Americans, blacks, Afro Americans, whichever one you want to call them, I'm going to call them black people. Okay, I'm a black man. I'm African American. I'm not been going all of that. As black people, according to one statistical finding I found out, was that black people have the highest rate of abortion among all the ethnic groups in America. Over 14 million babies since 1973, Roe v. versus Wade, as I mentioned earlier, when abortion was legalized in America, over 14 million babies have been aborted in the black community alone. And according to these sources, these resources that state this is the highest abortion rate among all ethnic groups in America. Asians, whites, Hispanics, we got the highest, but blacks have the highest abortion rate, which could explain why our numbers are not risen. According to statistical findings data states that we only make up 13% of the population. If there's over 300 million people in America and we only make up 13% of the population, that's like 40 to 42 million. And whites, according to the statistical findings, make up 60 to 65% of the 300 something million people in America. That's like 180 million at least. And yet our numbers, we've been at 13%, blacks have been at 13% in terms of our numbers for many, many years, and it has not increased. Many critics, including myself, believe that one of the reasons for that is because of the fact that we keep aborting all these babies. For every one baby that is born, according to statistical findings, 8 to 10 babies are aborted in the African American or the black community. In addition to that, I'm going off a little tangent here, but in addition to that, we have the highest rate of homicide. And I'm pretty sure that my listeners know this quite off the bat, that we have the highest rate of homicide among all the ethnic groups in America. And in fact, in 2017, I was reading a statistical finding in one of the books that I purchased. And according to the statistical finding, the writer found out in 2017, I believe it was in either Chicago or New York, one of those very violent cities, that over 7,000 blacks were killed by other blacks in that year alone. 7,000. And then we wonder why we're not growing. See, this goes into this whole police brutality nonsense that I keep seeing and keep hearing from the mainstream media, but that's another story, and that may be in another video. But I have to just give you a briefing of how I became a conservative. So I am a hardcore conservative. Well, maybe I should say hardcore. But I am a conservative. I don't agree with everything that Republicans do. I don't. I don't agree with all the policies that some of the Republicans are doing. I don't agree with all the policies. But for the most part, I feel the policies of the conservatives are the best policies for America and black people in particular. Now, I want to speak also on something that's important. That is that every now and then on my future videos, you will see me reading. I'm going to be reading articles from the Epoch Times. Now, some of you may or may not have heard of the Epoch Times. I'm subscribed to the Epoch Times. It's a very great newspaper. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you a picture of it now. This is the Epoch Times. Okay, it's the Epoch Times here. Can't see it. Well, anyway, this is the Epoch Times. I think this is the latest issue. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. Forgive me. This isn't the latest issue. This is June 9th to June 15th, 2021. I just recently got the other one today, but every now and then I'll be reading articles from the Epoch Times. They're very current. They have a conservative ideology, but they are very unbiased, meaning that even though they have more of a conservative ideology, they show the other side as well, and they allow you, the reader, to determine which one is the most factual. And I like that. Okay, so I will be reading every now and then in my future videos. I will be reading every now and then from the Epoch Times, right? Articles from Epoch Times, and I will be giving my own opinion on that. And finally, in my video, I wanted to say here, in finalizing this, that all my listeners, I'm going to assume that you guys are doing it, but if you're not, let's just say here that we have to do a better job at digging deeper than just going by what they say on the mainstream media. CNN, MSNBC, CBS, even Fox, which is supposed to be a conservative media outlet, mainstream media outlet, but according to some sources, I'm hearing that they are starting to merge a little bit to the left as well. You know, because they don't tell you everything. We have to dig a little bit deeper. We have to buy books if we're not buying them. We have to take the time out to read. If it's nothing but a page a day or a page every other day, read. Everybody can do it. If you can read, go ahead and read. Read. Dig deep. We got to dig a little bit deeper than what we're seeing on the mainstream news, because evidently the mainstream news is not telling you everything that you should know. They're not telling you everything you're supposed to know. In fact, according to some statistics, state that more and more people throughout this country are leaving the mainstream media viewage and transferring over to alternative news sources, like the ones I mentioned earlier: Anthony Barr Logan, Patricia Dixon, Random T. Tatum, Jericho Green, Larry Elder, and others. They're starting to transfer over to them because they're not getting all the news that they should be getting on the mainstream, but also they're finding out that a lot of the things that the mainstream is saying is a lie. They're twisting the facts. People are not as dumb as a lot of these reporters and journalists and politicians think they are. So I thank you all for watching this video. Perhaps I might make another one at the end of the day, and I'm going to get into some other deeper subjects I might be reading. In my next video, I more likely might be reading some Epoch Time articles and talking about that, and we'll go from there. But I thank you all for your time and listening to me. God bless you. Have a great day.